The MG42 was a 7.92A, 57mm Mauser general-purpose machine gun that was developed in Nazi Germany and entered service with the Wehrmacht in 1942. It supplemented, and, in some instances, replaced the MG34 general-purpose machine gun in all branches of the German armed forces, though both weapons were manufactured and used until the end of the war. The MG42 has a proven record of reliability, durability, simplicity, and ease of operation, but is most notable for its ability to produce a high volume of suppressive fire. The MG42 had one of the highest average cyclic rate of any single-barreled man-portable machine gun, between 1,200 and 1,500 rpm, which results in a distinctive muzzle report. The MG42's lineage continued past Nazi Germany's defeat, forming the basis for the nearly identical MG1, and subsequently evolving into the MG1A3, which was in turn followed by the MG3. It also spawned the Swiss MG51, SIG MG710-3, Austrian MG74, and the Spanish 5.56mm Amelie light machine gun, and lent many design elements to the American M60 and Belgian MAG. The MG42 was adopted by a number of armed organizations after the war, and was both copied and built under license. History, development. During the 1930s the German army introduced the MG34, considered to be the first modern general-purpose machine gun. Equipped with a quick-change barrel and fed with belts or saddle drum magazines, the MG34 could fire for much longer periods of time than weapons such as the American BAR and the British Bren gun, while being much lighter than crew-served weapons like the M1919 or Vickers machine guns. The weapon was also quite versatile. It was able to be fed from belted ammunition and a saddle drum magazine and fired from heavy tripods or various pintle mounts for armored vehicles. It even became a primary defensive gun for the Luftwaffe, in its MG81 form, and as secondary armament on tanks as the MG34 Panzerlauf. However, it did have its drawbacks, such as sensitivity to dust and comparatively expensive production. One attempted improvement was the MG34S, an incremental improvement on the basic 34 design. In order to address these issues, a contest was held for a true MG34 replacement. 3 companies were asked to submit designs: Metal und Lackiererin Fabrik Johannes Gruoff UAG of Dar Paragraph Biln, Reline Metal Borsig of Saar Paragraph Meder, and Star 1/4 BGEN of Erfurt. Of the number of proposals submitted, Gruoff UAG's proved to be the best design by far, employing a unique recoil-operated roller locking mechanism, whereas the 2 competing designs used a gas-actuated system. Interestingly, the company had no prior experience in weapons manufacture, specializing in pressed and stamped steel parts. Dr. Ing. Werner Gruner, one of the leading design engineers with Gruoff UI, knew nothing about machine guns when he was given the task of being involved with the project, but he specialized in the technology of mass production. Gruner would attend an Army machine gunner's course to familiarize himself with the utility and characteristics of such a weapon, also seeking input from soldiers. He then recycled an existing Mauser-developed operating system and incorporated features from his experiences with Army machine gunners and lessons learned during the early stages of the war. Being made out of stamped metal, the new design required considerably less tooling and was much simpler to build than other machine guns. It took 75 man-hours to complete the new gun as opposed to 150 man-hours for the MG34, and cost 250 Rm as opposed to 327 Rm. The resulting MG39 remained similar to the earlier MG34 overall, a deliberate decision made to maintain familiarity. The only major changes from the gunner's perspective were dropping of most of the drum feed options, leaving the weapon to fire with a loose belt of ammunition or from a single 50-round drum-shaped belt container fitted to the gun's receiver, and simplifying the weapon's open sights for aiming purposes. All these changes being intended to increase, maintain, or accommodate the gun's high practical rate of fire. Although made of relatively cheap parts, the prototypes also proved to be considerably more rugged and resistant to jamming than the somewhat temperamental MG34. a limited run of about 1,500 of its immediate predecessor, the MG39/41, was completed in 1941 and tested in combat trials. The weapon was officially accepted, and the main manufacturing of the production design began in 1942, as the MG42, contracts going to Gruoff Mauser worker, Gustloff worker and others. Production during the war amounted to over 400,000 units. Service history. One of the weapon's most notable features was its comparatively high rate of fire of about 1,200 rounds per minute, twice the rate of the Vickers and Browning machine guns at 600 round min. So effective was the weapon that the United States Army created training films to aid its soldiers in dealing with the psychological trauma of facing the weapon in battle. At such a high rate the human ear cannot easily discern the sound of individual bullets being fired, and in use the gun makes a sound described as like ripping cloth, and giving rise to the nickname Hitler's Buzzle, or, more coarsely, Hitler's Zipper. German soldiers called it Hitler's Currency or bone saw. The gun was sometimes called Spandau by British troops, as was the MG34, as a generic term for all German MGs from the manufacturer's plates noting the district of Berlin where some were produced, much like the Germans' own World War I MG08 had been nicknamed. Notwithstanding the MG42's high rate of fire, the handbook of the German Army forbade the firing of more than 250 rounds in a single burst and indicated a sustained rate of no more than 350 rounds per minute to minimize barrel wear and overheating. The high rate of fire resulted from experiments with preceding weapons that concluded that since a soldier only has a short period of time to shoot at an enemy, it was imperative to fire the highest number of bullets possible to increase the likelihood of a hit. The disadvantage of applying this principle was that the weapon consumed exorbitant amounts of ammunition and quickly overheated its barrel, making sustained fire problematic. The method of barrel change made the MG42 unsuitable for secondary or coaxial armament on World War II-era German tanks with the exception of the Jagged Panzer IV. Early versions of the Jagged Panzer IV carried two standard MG42s on both sides of the gun mantlet glasses, firing through a ball slot which was protected by an armored cover when not in use. Later version Jagged Panzer IVs carried only one MG42 on the left side. In the German heavy machine gun platoon, each platoon served 4 MG34 per milligram 42 machine guns, used in the sustained fire mode mounted on tripods. In 1944 this was altered to 6 machine guns in 3 sections with 2 7-man heavy machine gun squads per section. Heavy machine gun squad, squad leader MP40, machine gunner MG34 per milligram 42 and pistol, assistant gunner pistol, 3 rifleman rifles, horse leader for horse, cart and trailer rifle, operation. The MG42 weighed 11.6 kg in the light roll with the bipod, lighter than the MG34 and easily portable. The bipod, the same one used on the MG34, could be mounted to the front or the center of the gun depending on where it was being used. For sustained fire use, it was matched to the newly developed Lafette 42 tripod, which weighed 20.5 kg on its own. The barrel had polygonal rifling and was lighter than the MG34s and heated more quickly, but could be replaced in seconds by an experienced gunner. The optimum operating crew of an mg42 for sustained fire operation was 6 men, the gun commander, the number 1 who carried and fired the gun, the number 2 who carried the tripod, and no 3, 4, and 5 who carried ammunition, spare barrels, entrenching tools, and other items. For additional protection the commander, number 1 and number 2 were armed with pistols, while the remaining 3 carried rifles. This large team was often reduced to just 3, the gunner, the loader, and the spotter. The gunner of the weapon was preferably a junior non-commissioned officer. U.S. and British doctrine of the era centered around the rifleman, with the machine gun serving a support role. German doctrine was the reverse, with the machine gun placed in a central role and riflemen employed in support. This meant that German forces deployed far more machine guns per equivalent-sized unit than the Allies, and that Allied troops assaulting a German position almost invariably faced the firepower of the MG42. it was possible for operating crews to lay down a non-stop barrage of fire, ceasing only when the barrel had to be replaced. This allowed the MG-42 to tie up significantly larger numbers of enemy troops. Both the Americans and the British trained their troops to take cover from the fire of a MG-42, and assault the position during the small window of barrel replacement. The high rate of fire of the MG-42 sometimes proved a liability, mainly in that, while the weapon could be used to devastating effect, it could quickly exhaust its ammunition supply. For this reason, it was not uncommon for all soldiers operating near an MG-42 to carry extra ammunition, thus providing the MG-42 with a backup source when its main supply was exhausted. Design details. The MG-42 is 7.92x57, a Mauser, air-cooled, belt-fed, open-bolt, recoil-operated machine gun with a quick-change barrel. The roller-locked bolt assembly consists of a bolt head, 2 rollers, a striker sleeve, bolt body, and a large return spring, which is responsible for pushing the bolt assembly into battery and returning it there when it is unlocked and pushed backwards by the recoil of firing or by the charging handle. As the striker sleeve is movable back and forth within the bolt assembly, the return spring is also responsible for pushing the striker sleeve forward during locking. The bolt assembly locks with the barrel's breech via a prong-type barrel extension behind the breech. As it is recoil-operated and fired from an open bolt, the weapon must be manually charged with a side-mounted charging handle. The roller-locked recoil operation functions as follows: 2 cylindrical rollers, positioned in tracks on the bolt head, are pushed outwards into matching tracks in the barrel extension by the striker sleeve and lock the bolt in place against the breech. Upon firing, rearward force from the recoil of the cartridge ignition pushes the striker assembly back and allows the rollers to move inwards, back to their previous position, unlocking the bolt head and allowing the bolt assembly to recoil, extracting the spent cartridge and ejecting it. The return spring then pushes the bolt assembly forwards again, pushing a new cartridge out of the belt into the breech, and the sequence repeats as long as the trigger is depressed. The MG-42 is only capable of fully automatic fire. Single shots are exceptionally difficult, even for experienced operators, due to the weapon's rate of fire. The usual training objective is to be able to fire a burst of no more than 3 rounds. The weapon features a recoil booster at the muzzle to increase rearwards force due to recoil, therefore improving functional reliability and rate of fire. The shoulder stock is designed to permit gripping with the left hand to hold it secure against the shoulder. Considerable recoil otherwise causes the stock to creep from its intended position. If the weapon is not properly seated on the bipod, a prone gunner may be pushed back along the ground from the high recoil of this weapon. The sighting line consists of AA section type post or an inverted V-height adjustable front sight on a folding post and a leaf rear sight with an open V-notch sliding on a ramp, graduated from 200 to 2000 meters. There is an anti-aircraft rear peep sight hinged on the open rear sight base. An auxiliary anti-aircraft ring sight is kept in the maintenance kit, and fitting on the barrel jacket to be used in conjunction with the folding anti-aircraft rear peep sight attached to the rear sight base. Another unique feature of German World War II machine guns was the Tiefenführautomat. If selected, this feature walked the fire in wave-like motions up and down the range in a predefined area. For example, being unsure whether the real distance was 2,000 meters or 2,300 meters, the gunner could make the man do an automatic sweep between the elevations for 1,900 to 2,400 meters and back. This sweeping of a given range continued as long as the gun fired. Variants and developments. MG-45. In 1944, the material shortages of the Third Reich led to the development of a newer version, the MG-45, which had a different operation mechanism that used delayed blowback as opposed to roller locking. For this reason, the MG-45 is considered a different type of firearm, as the mechanisms of these two guns are different. It used steel of lesser quality, which reduced weight to 9 kg, while retaining the horizontal cocking handle. First tests were undertaken in June 1944, but development dragged on and eventually only 10 were built. The tested MG-45 40 seconds V fired 120,000 rounds in succession at a rate of fire around 1,350 rounds per minute. The MG-42V had some influence in the post-war development of roller delayed blowback system, as employed in modern Heckler & Koch small arms. T-24 machine gun. The American military tried to copy the MG-42 during the war as a possible replacement for the Browning automatic rifle and M1919A4 for infantry squads, the new version being adapted for the .30-06 cartridge. Saginaw Steering Gear constructed a working prototype designated as the T-24 machine gun, which could also be used on an M2 tripod. However, the realization that the .30-06 cartridge might be too long for the gun's mechanism to easily cope with, and most notably a design flaw in the prototype, resulted in the discarding of the project. M53. Yugoslavia built the MG-42 reverse-engineered clone at the state-owned Zavodi Crvena Zastava company as the M53 machine gun, retaining the 7.92A, 57mm Mauser caliber. By doing so, the Yugoslavians retained the original weapon's design features, making the M53 a nearly exact copy of the German MG-42. The only major difference is a slower rate of fire. The aiming range of the M53 is 2,000 am, and the terminal range of the bullet is 5,000 am, the same as the MG-42. MG-42s captured in Yugoslavia at the end of World War II were put into reserve of Yugoslav People's Army as M53/42s. The last military use of M53s in Yugoslavia was in 1999. Some quantities of M53s were exported to Iraq in the 1980s and saw extensive action during both Gulf Wars. M53 was known under the nickname Angstrom Iraq. MG3, the MG-42, with small modifications, resulted in the Beretta MG-42 59th Euro still used by the Italian Army Euro, and Rheinmetall MG3, which is the primary general-purpose machine gun of the modern German armed forces. A number of other armies around the world have adopted versions of the original, especially the MG3, and it remains in widespread service today. Its belt feed mechanism was copied and used in the design of the M60 machine gun. The T-161 beat the FG-42-derived T-52 during tests in the 1950s to become the M60. The T-161 used a different gas system and was easier to make than the T-52, but they both used a similar belt feed and basic configuration. The trigger mechanism of the FN MAG or MAG-58 is a virtual copy of the MG-42's, and the MAG-58's belt feed is also very similar. Rate of fire, variable, from 900 rounds min to 1,500 round min or more depending on installed bolt weight. Throat erosion and component wear also introduced significant variation. Up to 1,800 round min on the MG-45 all without recoil booster. Parts changes, barrel 3 to 7 seconds, barrel and lock, 25 to 30 seconds. MG-74. The final variant to date is the MG-74, developed by Austria, and since 1974 it is the standard machine gun of the Austrian Armed Forces. After its founding in 1955, the Austrian Army was equipped with old guns temporarily out of U.S. stocks. Starting in 1959, these Browning M1919 were largely replaced by the MG-42 with modified barrel and bolt for the new 7.62mm NATO caliber. But to introduce a modern weapon of its own production, the Office of Defense Technology, in cooperation with Stearman Licher and Beretta, developed a gun specifically for the Austrian Army. The German MG-42/59 that was introduced in 1959 with a Bundeswehr to replace the U.S. machine guns, served as the basis, which was similar to the Austrian 7.62 MG-42. Targets were to reduce, among other things, the rate of fire and weight and have more versatile sights and mount. The development of the weapon was completed in 1974. It replaced from this year the MG-42 as the MG-74 of the Austrian Federal Army. The modifications to the basic MG-42 design include an extremely heavy bolt which reduces the rate of fire to around 850 rounds per minute. Rate of fire can be varied, if necessary, by changing the shutter. In addition, a select fire trigger group was added to allow semi-automatic fire compared to the traditional fully automatic only fire capability of the original MG42 design. The MG74 also has a modern polymer stock and hand grips to save weight. Usually colored a dark green, adjustable rear sight and additional anti-aircraft sight can be mounted optional. See also, MG34 mg 51, CETME Amelie, Spanish GPMG, MG3, modern successor of the MG42, SIG MG 710-3, Swiss GPMG derived from the MG42, Carabine Maschinengewehr Rotora WZ-37 Polish machine gun from the early World War II. References. Bibliography, Will Banks, James H. Machine Guns, An Illustrated History of Their Impact. Santa Barbara, California, ABC Clio. ISBN A978-1-85109-480-6. External links, video of an mg-42 being fired on YouTube, Nazarian S. Gun S. Recognition Guide MG42, Proper Assault, Modern Firearms and Ammunition, MG42, U.S. Report on MG42 from World War II, MG42 Enthusiasts and Semi-Auto Rebuilders,